Good to see everyone this evening. We move through the book of Revelation. I think there might be a couple books left back there. I don't know if they're all gone or not. If you want one, you're welcome to that if it's available. Talked about Revelation 4 last week. And Revelation 4 was about the throne of God and about the power of the throne of God and the majesty of the throne of God and the glory of the throne of God and the idea that God is in control and God is in power and God sits on a spiritual throne in heaven and rules from there. And it was an encouragement to those people of those seven churches, that God was truthfully in control of what was going on. But as much as chapter 4 is about the throne room of God and about God and his glory and majesty, chapter 5 is about the Lamb, about Jesus Christ, the Messiah. Chapter 5 of the book of Revelation is probably my favorite chapter of the whole book of Revelation for a lot of different reasons. And let me read it to you briefly, and then we'll look at it just a little bit. It says, "I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a book written inside and on the back, sealed up with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to open the book and to break its seals?' And no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the book or to look into it. Then I began to weep greatly, because no one was found worthy to open the book or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, 'Stop weeping. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals.' And I saw between the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders a lamb standing as if slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. When he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one holding a harp and golden bowls of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, 'Worthy are you to take the book and to break its seals. For you were slain and purchased for God with your blood men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom of priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth.' And I looked, and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, and the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, 'Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing.' And every created thing which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth and on the sea and all things in them, I heard saying, 'To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and dominion forever and ever.' And the 4 living creatures kept saying, 'Amen,' and the elders fell down and worshiped." A real powerful book, powerful imagery of Christ being worthy. What a wonderful, wonderful chapter of the book of Revelation. And we'll look at that just a little bit as soon as I get down to it. Let's go back 1 second and look at that slide briefly, because I want to get that in your mind. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, right? Need to remember that. That's how the book of Revelation's laid out. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. The seals are the revelation of God. That's what we're looking at tonight. The beginning of the scroll, the 7 seals, is the revelation of God. The 7 trumpets are the sounding, are the announcement of impending judgment. The bowls are the judgment, or are the action. So you have announcement, you have proclamation, and you have retribution, basically, is the way the book of Revelation is laid out. And they're all in 7s, and there's interludes between those two, or between those different factions. So we kind of need to remember that. That's how it's laid out. Tonight, we're going to start looking at the seals a little bit, and I've got to get down to chapter 5. Hold on 1 second. I will soon be there. So when we begin to look at Revelation 5, the first thing we see is this scroll in the right hand of him. It's really interesting when you look at this idea. It's the right hand of him who sat on the throne, a book written inside and on the back, sealed up with 7 seals. Now we can't look at this. Once again, this is imagery, and you can't look at this as a literal book, because that wouldn't make sense, right? I mean, that wouldn't make sense. So we're not looking at this as a book, okay? This is a scroll. So it's a scroll like you see, top and bottom, where you wind it. It's put together. It's sealed with 7 seals. Seals in the Old Testament were either from a signet ring, or they were waxed and present with a signet ring. They were not to be broken by anyone who didn't have authority to break them. That's what seals were. And so these seals is what was sealing up the prophecy of the scroll. Now another thing we have to look at is that this scroll was written on, according to the text. There we go. The scroll was written according to the text. It was written front and back. So what it means is that there's no more room for anything else. So what that's telling us is that this prophecy of Revelation, it's complete. In other words, there's nothing else we can add to it. It's filled up. Front and back. Written front and back. So it's full. There's nothing else we can add to this idea. It was a strong angel. We don't know which angel. A lot of times we think of hierarchies of angel, Gabriel, Michael. We don't know that's the case. We don't know what angel this was. We guess if there's strong angels, there's weak angels, there's angels of more authority. I think the Bible kind of plays that out. But the strong angel proclaimed, "Who is worthy to open the book and to break its seals?" And no one, it says here, no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the book or to look into it. So no one had the power, the authority to open this prophecy, to open this book. There was no one found worthy. So the mighty angel, all these things in heaven, none of them are found worthy to open the book. Maybe I don't have all this slide in there. I don't. Okay, so you're just going to bear with me tonight. We're just going to do this without slides. So no one was found worthy to open the book. What's really amazing to me, and this is kind of good because I just really did this off the cuff anyway. What's amazing to me about Revelation 5 is you see the power and majesty of Jesus Christ, because he did what God wanted him to do. He did what was required. No one was worthy but Jesus, because he's the one who actually performed what God intended for him to do, and he was the only one, because of what he had done, that was able to open the seals. Now, when we think of this scroll being sealed with 7 seals, and you picture that in your mind, you would think, okay, to read the scroll, I would need to break all 7 seals, right? I would need to break all those seals, and I would need to be able to unroll the scroll. But the way the book of Revelation is played, because this is figurative, this isn't literal, need to keep that in mind. So the way the book of Revelation is played out, every seal is going to reveal something. So in other words, instead of us looking like the scroll, like, okay, I need to break all 7 seals and unroll the scroll and read it, and the way the book of Revelation, the imagery of Revelation, the way it's played out, is that every seal that's broken is going to reveal something. So every seal is a revelation, and no one's worthy to open it except for the Lamb. And I love how Jesus is portrayed. And I want you to, if we could just sit and talk about this for a minute, I really want you to look at chapter 5, or verse 5 here. It says, and one of the elders said to me, "Stop weeping. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, is overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals." Now, what's really interesting is the portrayal of Christ here. John's not portraying Christ here as this victor, as this conquering king. Okay, because that's not what made him worthy to open the seals. It's not his power or might that made him worthy to open the seals of Revelation. It was his obedience to God's plan, to what God wanted to do. Now, it's really interesting as John phrases this here, because this is John. And if we go back to the Gospel of John, John often looks at Jesus as this lamb. In other words, it's kind of this same imagery. When John the Baptist saw Jesus coming to be baptized, you go back and remember that passage. When John the Baptist saw Jesus coming, what did he say? He didn't say, behold the king, behold the Messiah, right? He said, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, right? Because it's not Jesus' might and majesty and power. Even though we understand Christ has all those things, it's not that allows him the power and authority to break the seals. It's the fact that he did exactly what God wanted him to do. So when Jesus shows up, not as conqueror, not as king, not as King Jesus, Prince Jesus, not as Messiah Jesus, but John portrays him here as what? As number one, he says a line from the tribe of Judah, right? Well, we know that has to be the case because it has to be from Judah. The root of David, right? The root of David has overcome so as to open the book. And then listen to how Jesus is viewed. Got to remember, this is imagery, right? This is imagery. So when John sees Jesus, he's announced, behold, he's worthy. Jesus enters the throne room of God. And when John sees Jesus in the throne, he says what? He says, a lamb standing as if slain. You see? In other words, it was his obedience, it was his sacrifice, it was his death on the cross. And this goes right back to Isaiah 53. Right? Isaiah 53 says, Jesus was led as a lamb to the slaughter, as a sheep to his share, was dumb, did not open his mouth. Goes right back to Isaiah 53. Right back to the prophecy of Isaiah. So Jesus was worthy because of his obedience to what God wanted him to do. And we can't miss that in this passage. Because oftentimes we think it's might or strength or power that gives us authority in God's kingdom. But authority in God's kingdom comes from sacrifice, not from power. And the only way that Jesus had the authority to break the seals was because he was obedient to what God had asked him to do. And it's really powerful imagery. But the other thing, if you look a little further into that passage, it says what? It says he had 7 horns. Horn in the Old Testament is always power. If you remember right, when you talk about Jacob, it talks about the horn of Jacob in the Old Testament. The power of Jacob, Israel. Jacob was renamed Israel. The 12 tribes come from Jacob, and it talks about that horn. We talked about numerology. 7 is perfection, right? Completeness in the book of Revelation. So when we say 7 horns, it means he had complete power, okay? Because horn in the Old Testament is power. So he had complete power, but also he had 7 eyes. And that is his omniscience, right? It's the idea that he's all-seeing, which are the 7 spirits of God that go into the corners of the earth. And it portrays him not just as Jesus, but as God. You know, we really struggle with this, don't we? It's really, really hard in the book of Revelation because we're like, well, Jesus and God are one, but yet here's God on the throne with a scroll in his hand, and here's Jesus coming in as a lamb has been slain, and yet we say they're one. That's pretty difficult, isn't it? Because here, once again, we're seeing, even though we see the Godhead and we see that God is one, we're seeing a dual personality of God. We're seeing 3 personalities of God, right? The Spirit of God, the Jesus is God, God is God. So we struggle with that a little bit, but let's not get sidetracked on that for the minute because we'll wind up somewhere we don't want to be. And so he comes into this. He came and he took the book out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. In the Greek, it was in his open hand. So in other words, God wasn't clutching the scroll like you can't get it, okay? God wasn't holding on to it like you can't have it. God was saying, here it is, right? In my open hand, who's worthy? You see? God wasn't restricting who could get it by saying, I'm going to keep it, but you had to be worthy. It's in his open hand. So when the angel comes and he takes it out of the open hand of God, which is really what the illustration here, he takes it out of the open hand of God, and of him who sat on the throne, when he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down, each holding a harp. One of the greatest passages of prayer is right here. Harp is praise, okay, in Old Testament. Now, so when you start looking at harp, you have to look towards praise. Bowls if we go back to the illustration, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. I said the seals were annunciation, right? The seals were the proclamation, annunciation, and judgment. The bowls are judgment. So when he says he had bowls, the bowls are significant because bowls in Revelation is when something happens. It's power. God pours out the bowl. So the bowl's powerful. So when you look at this passage, well, the amazing thing about this is it says each holding a harp. What are the bowls? So it's imagery. Remember this. It's imagery. It's John trying to describe what John's seeing. So he sees the bowls in heaven. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a child of the 70s. And in the 70s, we burned a lot of incense for multiple reasons. We burned a lot of incense in the 70s. And you know, as a kid, even though everybody did that, it was always sickening to me. It was just so overpowering. You'd walk into a room where people were burning incense. It was like, somebody opened the window. You know, I mean, it just engulfs the room. It fills the room with its fragrance. It's overpowering, which is why we burned incense in the 70s, needless to say. But it's overpowering, right? The smell is overpowering, and you can't get away from it. And so when John's imagery, where he talks about incense, you got to picture the throne room of God, and that this incense is filling the throne room of God. But what's really important in the passage is not that. What's important in the passage is what is the incense, you see? And it says in the text, it says the incense are the prayers of the saints. Now you see how it's setting up the book? Here's these people, these 7 churches of Asia. They're persecuted. Rome's killing them. Rome's taking their property. They're persecuted on every level that you can possibly imagine. And they're praying to God. They're crying out to God night and day. You can imagine. You would be, I would be. You're praying to God every day. Relieve us from this turmoil. Relieve us from this conflict. Relieve us from Rome. Relieve us from all this being killed and our property being taken away and the fear that we live in our lives and the famine that we're experiencing. And oh, Lord, help us. And oh, Lord, hear us. And oh, Lord, do something. And God doesn't seem to be doing anything. And so they're discouraged. You would be. I would be discouraged. They're discouraged. God's not doing it. So when John puts this imagery of Revelation, he says, oh, but yes, but listen. Your prayers are filling the throne room of God. They're the incense. They're all around God's throne. God not only sees your prayers, he's engulfed with your prayers. They're overpowering to him. And because of that, God's going to do something. You see, God's going to do something because your prayer is in the throne room of God. And God is overpowered by your prayers, and it's surrounding the throne. It's like incense in the throne. And because of that, God's going to do something. Something's going to imminently happen, because your prayers are in God's throne room. And what a powerful imagery of prayer. Sometimes when I pray, I think of my prayer just being floating, just the words being incense in God's throne room. Because that's what it says it is. It says our prayers are incense in the throne room of God. And how powerful is that imagery? And they sang a new song. And in the Bible, when you sing a new song, there's always a reason. When they came across the Red Sea and Miriam sang a new song, Hannah's song of praise at the birth or the annunciation of Samuel being born, Mary's Magnificat when she was revealed that she was going to bear the Messiah, or Jesus. Songs in the Bible, new songs in the Bible, are about a revelation, praise to God. And in this word song, this word, there's 3 different words for song in the Old Testament. And in the Greek, and this particular word's ode, and it's used 28 times in the New Testament. And it always really refers to praise to God. It's song of praise. Praise to God is really what that means. So this is a song of praise because it's something new. It's something that is a change. It's something to be rejoiced over. And it gives you an idea of the number of what's in the throne room of God. The living creatures, the elders, myriads and myriads. It means uncountable is what that means. Uncountable number. More than you can imagine. Myriads upon myriads. Thousands upon thousands. Innumerable angels. How many angels are there in heaven? More than you can shake a stick at, right? I mean, there's a lot of angels in heaven. Am I right? And that's what it's saying. It's saying this more. And the reason that that's brought up is because it really brings significance to the authority of Christ being able to open those seals. Because all these creatures are here. All these angels are here. The mighty angel that takes the scroll. The myriads of angels. The four living creatures who really transcend what we would consider seraphim and cherubim. We talked about that the other day. And all these other things that we can't even begin to imagine are in the throne room of God. And yet it's only Christ that has the authority to open the seal. And it really gives preeminence to Jesus and to his power and to his authority to do what he's supposed to do, to be able to do this thing. And every created thing in heaven rejoices and praises God. And then every created thing in the whole earth praises God. And it gives you the idea, or praises Christ. And it gives you the idea of his authority, the authority that he has to do what he's going to do. It's the beginning of prophecy of this book, the seals, the 7 seals. Jesus will open these seals, and one at a time, as we open these seals, as we'll talk about next Sunday night, as we begin to open these seals, one at a time, we're going to see with 4 horses of apocalypse, these seals are going to reveal something to us. So why was this so important? Chapter 4 and chapter 5 of the book of Revelation. Why are they so important to the 7 churches of Asia, to those Christians? Because they're persecuted, right? We've talked about it. They're in famine, they're in hunger, they're being killed, they're being murdered, their property's being confiscated. Rome is their enemy. Emperor worship has become a predominant thing in the Roman Empire. They cannot do that. Because of that, they're being tormented in all kinds of unspeakable ways. Many are dying. And now, guess what? The first thing we see is that God is in heaven, God's on a throne, and God's in power. The second thing we see is that Jesus Christ has done exactly what God wanted him to do, and because of that, he's worthy to open up the prophecy of this book, that things are going to change. And then we see that the prayers that you've been praying have not been falling on deaf ears, but yet they fill the very throne room of God, they surround God, and then because of that, God is going to do something. God is going to act. And then at the end of chapter 5, we see that Christ has the authority, has the power, has the praise, has the adoration, and the worship of everything in heaven and everything on earth. And we know that only God can receive worship. And therefore, at the end of chapter 5, we learn that Jesus is indeed God, that he can receive worship and honor, and that he has the power to execute the things that God's going to do to give relief to these people who are under this persecution. You see, Revelation was never meant to scare us. Revelation is a book of comfort. It's a book of assurance that yes, God does hear our prayers. God does answer our prayers. And that God will set everything right, even in a world that seems so wrong. Are the eternal truths in this book? Absolutely. Absolutely. But let's never lose sight of the fact that predominantly this book, this scene was written to the 7 churches of Asia to give them comfort. Now we have to open the seals, right? And reveal. Then we have to sound the trumpet and announce. Then we have to pour the bowls and have judgment. You see? Is that starting to make sense? Am I going too fast? Okay. Thanks for your time tonight. If we can help you in any way, won't you let it be known?